Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Mom, I just need you to call me back. Please. I really need to talk to you as soon as you get a minute. If you could just call me back, that would be great. I love you. Bye. Please. Please, please.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. Mom, I haven't slept. I'm so tired. Mom, I think I really need some help. I'm so scared. Things are so weird over here. Can you call me back? I just need you to call me back. Okay, I love you. Bye.
Hey, welcome to the Mothership Explores. We have Katie Rabbit from Down the Rabbit Hole at Bedtime with us again. Hi, Katie.
Hi, it's so good to see you here again, Lauren. I'm excited to be here talking about this very important topic.
It is important, and there's a lot of misconceptions about this topic that I think we might be able to help clear up a little bit through the tragedy of a few cases, unfortunately.
Right. A lot of cases that have become very popular or even famous in the media.
So, Katie, do you know that suicide is the leading cause of maternal mortality during the first postpartum year?
You know, Lauren, I had no idea that was the case. And when you brought it to my attention, before we started working on this podcast, I was really taken aback. I think that is an absolute shame, especially in a country with as much money and resources as we have, that women are still in a place where they are suffering so greatly from depression after birth that it's leading to suicide.
It breaks my heart, honestly.
Yeah.
It really breaks my heart because I think of these women who are expecting to have the most wonderful year of their life. Most of them who have seen women in advertisements or in commercials, cuddling and snuggling with this beautiful little infant and being in love, and they don't feel that way. And all of the emotions that must come with it.
Yeah. And I shared with you when we were working on the research for this podcast that I've spent the past 2 years in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And I was really surprised, shocked in a really good way, to watch birthing centers there and how they take care of mothers after birth, because that culture happens to believe in confinement after a woman gives birth. And confinement often includes the family coming together around the mother. And one of the big tenets of what they do is to always put the mother first, to care for the mother, to take care of the mother after she gives birth, because they acknowledge that the baby is going to be cared for. It will be cared for well by the mom, the dad, people around them. But the mother is the one who will be struggling, because so much of her body, so much of the nutrients and everything that she's been using to carry that baby for 9 months, it's all going to need to be replenished. And the family sees it as their job to help that mother replenish her body and her mind and her soul so that she can be the best mom possible to that baby. They bring in special foods, soups. They require the mother to stay in bed for a certain period of time. I will say that some moms have said it was a little bit too much for them. But overall, when I watched what was happening with this idea of confinement, I thought to myself, I think this could be something really wonderful for a lot of women who don't, participate in this culture.
Right. Since you've seen this firsthand, are they treating the mom as if she's sick, or is this a different kind of treatment?
Well, it's something that's passed down through the family. So I would say no, it's not like treating them as though they're sick. There's actually centers, like if a person doesn't really have a family that's able or willing to do it, they can pay a center to go into confinement for a period of time. It's really about support and ensuring that the environment that the mother is in is the best possible for her recovery after birth. And another big part of it there that's passed down generation through generation is replenishing the mother through certain soups that help her body regain the nutrients she
Like bone
lost
broths.
through giving birth. Exactly. All kinds of, and they have a very specific plan laid out that they'll go through with the mom, but it's been passed down through generations. So there are some women there who choose not to do it, but I found that overall, most people were participating on some level in the confinement. From those who live in poverty to those who are very wealthy, everyone is doing it, and it is part of the culture that you must take care of the mother after birth. Wouldn't that be amazing to have something like that here? I would have loved to, quote unquote, go into confinement.
I'd like to go into confinement
right
now. Yeah, you and me both.
Exactly.
Let's go. Sign me up.
Exactly. So, and I actually was thinking that when I was there, I got to go visit a confinement center, and I thought, oh, I'd just like to stay here for a month without having a baby. But it did make me think about some of the cases back home in the United States that had really rocked my world. I shared with you that the Andrea Yates case, one of the most famous cases of postpartum psychosis in the United States, it occurred as I think during the time that I was going to college, and it really helped me decide what I wanted to do with my own career, Laura, right? Because I was very taken aback by what happened to Andrea, how people in the media and just out in the general public really blamed her. Andrea murdered her children. And when I watched the whole trial unfold, I recognized that this woman was living in her own personal hell from which she would never escape. And I thought to myself, there's no prison, there's nothing that you could do to this woman that could be any worse than what has happened to her. I want to learn about what happened and try to prevent it from happening again.
Right. I recall the Andrea Yates, and I remember it was like a witch hunt. There wasn't any kind of understanding that was being offered, like through the media. They didn't even try to explain it. Like, why would she suddenly do this?
Right.
It was just this evil woman has taken the lives of her children and off with her head.
Exactly. And I remember I was younger then, and I just thought to myself, I was not a mother, and I thought, how can they do this to her? Looking at it from an outsider's perspective, someone who's not a mom yet, I just could not believe the response to it. I'm not saying set her free, let her do whatever she wants. I think if she were allowed to do whatever she wanted, Laura, she would have ended her life. But she was in custody, they were caring for her, but I just thought to myself, for people to dehumanize her to the extent of like, this is so sick. Yes, she was sick. She was really sick, right. And we need to know what happened so that we can help other people and we can save other children.
Leads us into what our topic is for today, and it's postpartum psychosis, which is a rare condition, but it's very severe, where new mothers are suffering from delusions, hallucinations. They've totally disconnected from reality. Their cognitive functioning is totally impaired. Their mood is off, and they have disorganized behaviors. It's postpartum psychosis is like the big granddaddy of all of the what are called perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, which is like depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD. Those are all more common after childbirth, and postpartum psychosis is more on the rare side. Like maybe 1 or 2 in 1,000 women will experience it. But to me, that's a lot.
And I think it's kind of a newer thing that they're recognizing that there's the postpartum OCD, PTSD, anxiety. But for a long time, they did recognize depression in women after giving birth. But there's such a difference in the depression and psychosis. Psychosis is certainly a much more severe situation.
Postpartum psychosis is considered a psychiatric emergency. It's nothing to mess around with.
Yes. And I mean, it can emerge suddenly, but my experience with it, like working in the emergency room, working on psych floors, is that it usually comes, there's a period of time that there's a buildup. They may experience like some depression at first, some anxiety, and the psychosis can develop from that. But we definitely see a lot of moms who are being treated. They're in some kind of a treatment when the psychosis fully develops.
Right, right. There are some risk factors for postpartum psychosis, and one of them is the most obvious one: pregnancy. Okay. So it can actually begin in pregnancy, and that was new to me too. I had no idea.
Oh, I didn't know that either. I mean, I definitely know depression can exist, anxiety can exist. So psychosis, I think it makes sense that it would be able to emerge in someone's brain because it is a biological issue. It is not just psychological. It's a biological problem that needs to be treated.
It's definitely a biological issue, but there are other factors that can definitely increase the likelihood. Moms who have a history of bipolar, 50% of moms who have experienced postpartum psychosis have a history of bipolar. The other 50% have zero, like no psychological history. And then there is the history of childhood trauma increases the risk for it, and history of childhood sexual abuse. And the big one, exhaustion. When new moms don't get the sleep that they need and they are bordering on this, exhaustion just might put them right into psychosis.
110%. And that goes back to what we were talking about with confinement, this ancient ritual. Part of it is to ensure that the mother is not exhausted. That is truly a part of the factor that led up to Andrea Yates' situation. When we look at and dissect that case very closely, we can see that Andrea had so many risk factors, but she was literally living a life with very little sleep. And I know for myself, you and I have spoken about this. We are both nurses. And we have worked in situations where we had to work night shift, and we've talked about how much it messes with your body, your mind, your mental health. You really have to be a strong person in order to be able to accommodate that kind of a schedule. And brand new mothers, they're living that schedule for quite a while after they give birth.
We don't recognize the postpartum period. We don't give the mother the attention that she needs. All of the attention is focused on the baby.
Exactly. That's exactly what they are talking about when they're doing confinement in these other countries, that the time has come to focus on the mom. The baby will be taken care of. So interesting.
So in the United States, it's very common for once the mother has given birth, that the attention shifts from her to that newborn baby. Everybody wants to see the new baby. Everybody wants to make sure the new baby is eating well, sleeping well, but they're not as focused on the mom usually. And I think that's where the real problem lies, because the moms are the ones, they're the mothership. The mothership goes down, so does the baby.
So well said, for sure. Yeah. And if you think about moms that also have to go back to work after having their kids, there's just so many factors that lead to exhaustion for moms across the board. But every once in a while, you have a mom with all of these risk factors, and it can really result in a catastrophe, like we have seen in some of these very popular cases in the media. Some of the signs and symptoms of postpartum psychosis include catatonia, which I've only seen that a couple of times in my nursing history on a psychiatric floor, which is interesting because I've seen so many things. But this is something that comes along very infrequently. And, to watch someone in a catatonic state, it can be very unnerving. Can be difficult to be around. They exhibit abnormal behaviors. They withdraw from everyone, and eventually they become immobile, kind of locked in place like a statue.
Well, it's interesting that you say you haven't seen much of it, and I believe that because 80% of the cases go undiagnosed and untreated.
Oh, that's crazy, 80%. So when we have had on the adult unit, women come in with postpartum psychosis, or even as we're starting to look at a mom and wonder if they're having this kind of severe diagnosis, what we often see is like very disorganized thought processes, right? So when we're talking to them, they're having difficulty even communicating. The things that they are saying to us just don't make sense. But one of the hallmarks of postpartum psychosis is delusions and hallucinations.
Right. And sometimes they think like their baby is the devil.
Right. Yeah. I've been around a lot of patients who are dealing with hallucinations. It can be absolutely terrifying to them. There are different types of hallucinations, including auditory. So frequently we have people come and tell us, like, I'm hearing someone say, to hurt my neighbor or to hurt my child. But I don't know who it is. Is it the devil that's talking to me? They often become very paranoid.
When you have seen these patients, what's the first thing that they do other than assess them? Like, what's the first treatment that they've gotten?
Well, first, they're going to be evaluated like extensively by a team. And I usually see people on inpatient. So this is going to be someone that's already been identified as either saying they want to hurt themselves or hurt others, because that is one of the only ways they can get onto our inpatient floor. Okay. So they're coming onto the unit. We're providing them with a safe environment, and they're going to go through a full like battery and range of tests with a team of people. And one of the first things they're going to be looking at is what medication. So we're always going to medication. And that's part of what our standardized healthcare when it comes to psychiatry does a lot of, go straight to medication to try to help individuals in this circumstance. And definitely with postpartum psychosis, when someone is having hallucinations, they need to be medicated to try to get some of that under control, to even just bring them back to the reality that we're all living in so that we can provide some more basic like therapies for them.
I wonder if they've ever tried balancing their hormones first.
Right. And I've never seen that in my own practice. That's not something that I've seen in conventional psychiatry on an inpatient
I don't think
unit.
I have either. I haven't heard of it. It just kind of occurred to me as like, we know that it's the hormones that are ultimately influencing this. So why not go straight to the problem?
Right. Well, yes, you definitely are trying to bring someone under control. They are in this situation saying that they may hurt someone else or hurt themselves. So we are in kind of an emergent situation in which we really want to bring this person to some level of not wanting to hurt others or hurt themselves. But I still believe there are a lot of things we could be doing in our healthcare system, like, for example, taking a look at hormones that would be so healthy for a mom, for a child, for everyone. But that's not something we typically are doing on a psychiatric unit. And one other thing that is a major issue is frequently we have the family and the husbands coming in and they're stating like, this just isn't my wife. She just isn't herself. She's not the person that I married. She's so not there. Some people report like they have such a vacant look on their face. Their wives are not themselves anymore. And so we do provide counseling. The spouse is going to be a big part of the treatment there. And yet, it's just my personal opinion that we don't do enough. We definitely, in my practice, I have seen situations in where I really did not feel that we were doing enough to include the spouse and include the family in what needs to be done to help this individual.
I can't argue that. I mean, with all of these cases, 1 in 5 moms are going to experience postpartum depression. And that's a really high number. And I think, in fact, I know there's no tools for physicians or nurses to use as they're discharging patients to assess them for the likelihood of experiencing postpartum depression. If it hasn't already happened in the hospital, usually it doesn't, because moms are in and out so fast that they're not there to experience, the depression that comes later. There are no tools to assess, though, for women or for physicians or nurses. So they're kind of just being shoved out the door, and like with a good luck, if you happen to feel sad, maybe they might say something. I don't think women are being educated. There's no way to assess them. There are no standardized tools. And women aren't being educated on all of this that could, have a huge impact on their lives.
I'll tell you something, Laura. I didn't feel educated as a new, an upcoming mom when I was getting ready to give birth to my first child. I look back now, and what I saw in Kuala Lumpur was a society who was preparing that mother and that family for a big change that was to come. I never felt that anyone was involved in anything that I was doing as I'm getting ready to give birth to my child. I know everybody has a different, situation. I didn't have a lot of family left when it was time for me to give birth to my daughter, Aubrey. And once she was born, there was such a big change in my family, in my life, in my goals and aspirations, how I felt about the world around me. And I didn't have anyone there preparing me for it or walking me through it when it was when I was actually in the midst of dealing with being a new mom. So for sure, I think that, certainly everybody's situation is different, but I remember thinking in Kuala Lumpur, it's such a major part of this culture to prepare women and their family for what is coming. And I could have really used something like that in my own life. So once again, we're just kind of barreling in on the fact that there are different ways to do this, and it's being done differently across the world. But in the United States, we are continuing to see high levels of postpartum depression with this occasional, extremely serious emergency type of situation with postpartum psychosis.
Yeah, I think the United States needs to look at places like Kuala Lumpur and India as well, because India does confinement. Yes. They need to look at their numbers and decide that perhaps postpartum moms need more support. Maybe in the long run, the cost wouldn't be as great if the moms had preventative care. Yeah. There are some other reasons why new moms don't get treatment, and one of them is just stigma. The American society does recognize birth as one of the most joyous events. So when a mom is not feeling joyous, she's ashamed of herself and afraid of the stigma of saying, I'm not happy. I don't feel like the other moms, or I don't. And she's afraid. She's afraid of what they're going to think. Some of them are afraid that if they really share their feelings, these dangerous feelings, that they're going to take their baby away. Now, I know that there are units around the world and different places where they have moms who are experiencing psychosis, where the babies are there with them, but they're not alone with them. So the bonding isn't interrupted, but the baby remains safe. We need something like that.
Yeah, the new parent is often feeling shame if they're not able to keep up with the demands of what's going on, if they don't automatically love this new world that they've just walked into, because people, they're thinking in their head, I chose this, I made this choice. I mean, hopefully they did. If they didn't, then, they can still feel some of the same issues, this kind of overwhelming shame of I'm really struggling with this. And they have unrealistic expectations of themselves. Maybe other people are putting unrealistic expectations upon them. And they will say to themselves, like, they'll put it off for as long as they can, thinking that they'll be able to fix it themselves. They're going to take care of it at home within their family. And if they don't have support around them of family members being able to really say, like, it's okay. It's okay if you're feeling this. It's okay if we need to get extra help. If they don't have that kind of push to take care of themselves, that can be another hindrance for them to get help.
Right. And then because of these really horrible cases that have come to light, like Lindsay Clancy and Carol Coronado, there's been a little bit of an awakening. So now the American Academy of Pediatrics has advised that all pediatricians start screening moms for like the first 6 months, like 3 or 4 of their office visits. But the problem is some of these pediatricians are not doing it and saying, well, I'm not the mom's physician, I'm the baby's. Dudette. Without mom, you don't have a patient. Mom is your patient too, for sure. For sure she is. Yeah. He might not be, or she might not be treating her directly, but anything related to that baby is going to be coming from the mother.
Right. That's a huge part of what any physician is doing when they're interacting with a pregnant mom and a postpartum mom. That should always be taken into account for sure. Yeah, I have so much sympathy and empathy for what new mothers have gone through. You know, I'm 40 years old now. I've had both of my kids, and I'm moving into like a different phase in my life as they're getting a little bit older. But when I look back on my life directly after giving birth, I recognize that it was a very hard time in many ways, and that providing as much support as possible, I would want to do that for any new mom in my life. And I would want to really like uplift them and let them know that I'm there for them on every possible level. And I do think it's good that a lot of these cases have become very popular in the media so that people know that this is a problem that's out there and that they are not alone if they're dealing with it or someone they love is dealing with postpartum psychosis.
Right. And I think there's also a lot of self-imposed pressure for new moms to do it all.
Right.
I can keep the house up. I can be that mom, especially with a first baby. By the second baby, they're just too damn tired. They don't care. But the first baby, when they don't really know what's hit them. And that's any time a woman gives birth, if you know somebody who's had a baby, be there for her. Bring her food. Don't ask her if she wants you to. Just do it. Help her in her house. When you come over, just do her dishes. Just start working. Help her out because she needs it. They all do.
That's great advice. Yeah, that's great advice.
Always. I mean, again, I wouldn't even offer because I know if someone said to you, hey, Katie, can I do your dishes for you? Come on, let me help out. You probably would have said, no, I'm fine.
Right.
Katie, do you want to go take a nap? I know you must be tired. You've been up nursing that baby all night. Don't you want to go take a nap? Oh, I'm fine. I got this. I don't know why we're so afraid to accept help. Or not afraid, but whatever. For whatever reason, it's hard to accept help. So that's why I say don't ask, just do it. Just do it.
And if our society had it built into our culture that help was needed and help should be given, then it would be a whole different kind of feeling for new moms. But I understand, like, you know, every culture is going to be a little bit different. But when you and I first started talking about doing this episode, I really needed to bring to you this case that completely surprised me. It kind of rocked my world because it is a very recent case of postpartum psychosis in which a woman named Lindsay Clancy killed all 3 of her children. And you brought up with me that she had many children, one right after another, very young, back to back. But for me, it was shocking to see this come out on the news because once again, we have another mother who was known and thought of in her community as being a wonderful mom, a wonderful wife, a nurse in a labor and delivery unit who had helped other moms get through the birth of their children time and time again, and was probably part of helping moms with anxiety, depression after they give birth. Lindsay Clancy had taken time off of work because she was struggling. She knew that she was struggling with postpartum depression. She was being medicated and she had a team of people that she was working with, and still the most awful possible outcome that could have happened occurred with this family.
Yeah, she knew she was having problems, and she was also seeing a psychiatrist to help manage this. I think she was seeing a few different physicians because she had a total of 13 medications, including Ativan, Klonopin, Valium, Zoloft, Prozac, Trazodone, Seroquel. I mean, she had a little mini pharmacy in her cupboard.
Yeah, and that makes me question how long these symptoms had been going on for, because usually you wouldn't get all of those medications in one sitting. There would have been a period of time where they were medicating you and it wasn't working, and so they keep adding more medications on. When Lindsay committed this crime, her youngest child was 8 months old. So it did not happen directly after the birth of her child. And that is something that can occur. You can have a period of time, I think it's up to a year, where they still consider it postpartum psychosis.
Yep. But it actually takes your body 5 years to recover.
Oh my God. I don't think I'm ever going to recover. But
maybe
yeah,
18 years.
Right. Everybody's different. But for Lindsay, like everyone around her says that she was an amazing mom. She was a nurse in a labor and delivery unit, and she was getting help. She, her husband, her family had reached out for help. They were willing to do medication. They were not the type of family who were refusing meds or didn't believe that this was a real diagnosis. They were doing everything right. Even Lindsay's husband, Patrick Clancy, had taken a leave of absence from work. And when he went back to work, he decided to work from home. His company worked with him so that he would be able to work from home from his basement so that he could stay there and provide safety and security and help Lindsay throughout the day with everything that she was going through.
Right. You hit a couple of words that made my ears perk up. Safety and security. I believe that he took this job at home because he was concerned. He was concerned about Lindsay being alone with her children because of her history. And we know that she struggled because she was very active on social media, and she belonged to groups on Facebook that were dedicated to self-help. And she posted that, you know, she would try all these things. And one of them that really stood out to me was that she wrote that she would try to do this waking up thing before everybody else, to do yoga and meditate. This woman was breastfeeding, and she was getting up several times a night with her baby, her 8-month-old. So even though she was so tired already, she's like, was dedicated to getting well. She was trying so hard. But that was one thing that went against her because she lost out on more sleep. So, because she was getting up to do these things, and the exhaustion, I can't emphasize this enough, how much exhaustion can hurt you psychologically and physically. It's so important to get sleep, especially when you're recovering.
Sure. And Lindsay Clancy, a few months before this event actually happened, had requested through insurance to try to go inpatient to get relief from the symptoms that she was having. It was bad enough. She recognized that it was bad enough that she wanted to go to an inpatient hospital on a psychiatric floor to get the help that she needed. And her insurance turned down her attempt to get that help. So unfortunately, we have a family that is recognizing there's a real problem here. We need help, and they are not able to jump through the hoops necessary to get Lindsay the help that she needed. So she's staying home. We've got Patrick, her husband, in the basement. We've got 3 small children. The youngest is 8 months, and they're all under the age of 5. She had a 5-year-old daughter and another 3-year-old son. On January 24th, Patrick was home in the basement of the house working. And according to Patrick, it was one of the best days Lindsay had had in a very long time. On the morning of this event, Lindsay had taken her 5-year-old daughter, Cora, to the pediatrician for an appointment, and the medical staff there, they noticed nothing out of the ordinary. She built a snowman when she got home with Cora and her 3-year-old son, Dawson, and she texted photos of herself having a great time to her mother and her husband. This day seemed like one of the best days Lindsay had had in a long time.
Right. So her husband must have felt like it was, you know, after being denied the admission for an inpatient treatment, Patrick felt that he had to take control of things. The pressure that must have been on him to help his wife by researching medications and researching treatments and researching, all while trying to work and keep his eye on things. Pressure must have been tremendous. And, you know, hats off to the guy. He tried. She tried. They both tried. And the fact that she was denied admission to a psychiatric unit on her own accord, she's saying, I need help. Who's going to say, I need to go to a psych unit? I mean, I would never, ever say I want to go to a psych unit. I mean, never, unless it was severe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, she's aware. She's a nurse. She is familiar with these medications, and she probably, I know as a nurse, would have had a hard time asking for help going into a hospital unit where other people are going to know. You may be even in the same hospital that you work in. So, she had to be pretty desperate, I think, to make this kind of a request. And things really fell apart on January 24th because Patrick, working really hard in the basement, looking forward to getting through with work so that he can spend some time with his wife. He receives a group of texts from Lindsay, and she's telling him like, oh, I had a really good day, but I can't make dinner tonight. Can you please, what would be great is if you picked up my favorite meal from the restaurant downtown, like I'll call it in. Would you be willing to do that? And his response is, oh yeah, sure, I can do that. And she lets him know
she's having a good day.
Right. And she lets him know, like, one of the reasons I really need you to do this is because I need a medication for our daughter. She needs some Miralax. She's having some tummy problems. So now he's got two important reasons why he needs to go out. The first is to give his wife a break from cooking dinner, and she's asking for something she really likes. So this seems like something he can do for her, something he can give to her after all these really hard times that they've been having over the last couple of months. And she really needs medication for their child. So I completely understand that his thought process is that this is a good thing that he's going to do. Leave her alone for a short period of time to go get these items for her and bring them home. But unfortunately, the time that he was gone was less than an hour. And during that short period of time, what happened in that house took a horrifying turn. When Patrick returned back to the home, he walked into an eerily silent house. He ran around looking for the children and his wife, and he couldn't find them. When he went into the backyard, he found his wife lying on the ground. She had attempted to kill herself by jumping out of the second-story window of their house. She was unable to move, and she was screaming in agony. Patrick immediately called 911. He asked her where the children were, and the 911 operator heard Patrick crying out and screaming as he found his 3 children in the basement. They were not moving, and they appeared to be not breathing.
Right. He was begging them to breathe. I can't imagine. Oh my God, that poor man. That poor man.
When Patrick took a moment to look around, he saw that there were exercise bands placed by the sides of the children. And later we would find out that these were used to strangle the children.
She had jumped from the second floor, as you had said. That was a 20-foot drop. He found her outside with her wrists slashed.
911 and EMS, they arrive, and unfortunately, Cora, their 5-year-old daughter, and Dawson, their 3-year-old son, were pronounced dead at the hospital upon arriving that evening. But 8-month-old Callan, he was still alive. They worked on him extensively with some kind of hope that maybe they would be able to save him. But unfortunately, he died in the arms of his father 3 days later in the hospital. And I know Patrick was really grateful that he got to hold Callan and be there with him as he passed away. Lindsay was transported to the hospital as well. And upon arriving, they immediately determined that she had injured her spine. She was unable to move. I believe it was from the waist down, but she was also having trouble with her arms at that point as well. And eventually she was charged with 2 counts of murder and 3 counts of suffocation or strangulation. She'd put in a plea of not guilty. And this was because her lawyers recognized she was incredibly sick when this happened. Her lawyers went on to argue that Lindsay had become a zombie who was completely over-medicated with antidepressants and other psychiatric drugs. The first hearing that Lindsay attended, she did it virtually from the hospital. She was not well enough to attend in person. She had a neck brace on. She wasn't moving. She had no expression. She was blank and vacant. She had a severe spinal cord injury. Her back was broken. She had also obtained some injuries to her ribs when she jumped, and she was still under suicide watch. They believed that she would try to take her own life if she was left alone in the hospital. Everyone said that she was extremely emotional, but she was unable to express happiness or sadness or cry. Can you imagine that kind of situation? That is psychosis. And she said to her husband and her attorneys, "I just wish that I could feel something." For me, when I heard the story of what happened to this amazing mother, someone who looks fit, active, happy, engaged with her children, someone who really from the outside, everyone believed this was a happy, loving, very successful family. But none of that matters when you have a biological condition like postpartum psychosis. And unfortunately, Lindsay was given a small window of opportunity to enact the horrible feelings she was having, and it resulted in a huge tragedy for everyone.
So people might be wondering, why would Patrick be saying she seemed fine and then she goes on to do such a horrible thing? One of the symptoms of postpartum psychosis is that it's a wax and wane. So the woman can seem absolutely fine one moment and then she's completely different the next. So she it's like a light switch.
Right.
It gets flipped and she's no longer herself. She's gone. She's not in touch with reality. She's hearing things perhaps or seeing things perhaps.
Yeah. If you can think of someone having hallucinations, they're frightened. They don't trust people around them. They become paranoid. They think, okay, they can't see what's going on. They can't hear what's going on. There's something wrong with them. Maybe they're not operating. Maybe my husband just doesn't understand what's going on here. Because we know that Lindsay actually researched how long it was going to take her husband to run these errands. We have the factual evidence of that. So it seems like she was planning to try to do something while he was gone, but that doesn't mean that it isn't psychosis. She definitely was in an active psychosis at the time. And I think that's very much, for me, it's very much summed up how horrible she was feeling by the fact that she was willing to jump out of a second-story window in hopes that she would die. I mean, that is one of the most extreme ways I can think of to try to commit suicide, Lauren.
Definitely. Yeah. It's usually like 5% of those who are suffering from psychosis who will actually commit suicide. I mean, there's varying degrees of this. And when you're at the point where you're hearing voices telling you to do these horrible things, you are in deep. Oh, well, where people are saying she was researching how long it was going to take for him to go pick up the food and like how long would it take? And people are assuming that it was because she wanted to figure out if she had enough time to kill her children. But maybe she was hoping it wouldn't take too long because she didn't want to kill her children.
Yeah, right. That's such a good point. We don't know for sure what was going on. That's very true.
We have no idea what was going on in her mind. I mean, only she knows, if she could even remember that. I don't know.
I just keep thinking back to what she said in the hospital to her husband and her attorney. I just wish I could feel something. Your 3 children who you clearly loved. There's no signs that you abused these kids. There's no signs that you neglected them. Everyone says you love these kids very much. They're gone and died in such a horrific way. And you're lying there with severe injuries that you'll never be able to overcome. You're lying there and you say, I just wish I could feel something. So sad.
It's very, very sad. And, any type of punishment that they could impose on her is nothing compared to what she's going to have to live with. Right. There's nothing.
And that's exactly now. So for me, it's really hard because I look back on the Andrea Yates case in the early 2000s, and now we have Lindsay Clancy's case this past year. Very similar situations. They did have different environments. I know that Andrea Yates was living in a situation where there were a lot of religious beliefs in her family that were contributing to some of her thoughts and feelings about what was going on. But with psychosis, it doesn't really matter. You'll take whatever's going on around you and you'll turn it into supporting the psychosis that you're in. So these are two women who are going through like similar situations. And I believe it's in the Yates case as well, that the family, they wanted to do the best they could. Of course, they wanted to protect these children. Of course, they wanted the mothers to be okay. And yet still, we have the same exact horrible consequence happening for Lindsay here, essentially almost 20 years later. And I still saw a lot of the same backlash, Laura. I don't know if you noticed it when
Yeah, I did.
It was still with Lindsay in the news. I still saw people having the same opinions, such as, she's sick, she planned it. What do you mean psychosis? And that's something that really bothers me, that I do feel like there needs to be continuing education about what this really is, what this really looks like. If you let a mother like Lindsay or Andrea out and you just say, you know what, we're not going to hold you accountable for this, I would imagine that within a short period of time, that's someone who's probably going to unalive themselves, because they are living in a hell on earth. Something that they can't ever get out of. I don't believe, actually, Andrea Yates has the right to go up for parole on an ongoing basis at this point in time, and she has refused it every single time. She won't even try to go up for parole and get out.
I want to talk about Carol Coronado as well.
Kimberlyn Borlanos was a woman in Chicago who ended up murdering her 5-month-old son in 2013. She believed that she was saving him from being kidnapped and tortured. This happened directly after she stopped breastfeeding. So there were like major hormonal changes going on, and she was experiencing postpartum psychosis. And she did try to come up with an insanity defense, but it did not work in the courtroom because she had admitted to feeling regret after she committed this crime. And in our legal system, that leads to that you had some sort of state of mind where you understood what you were doing is wrong.
And there's also a really sad case. I mean, they're all really sad, but Carol Coronado she's in California. And in 2015, she was found guilty of first-degree murder in the stabbing deaths of her 3 daughters, ages 2, 16 months, and 3 months, even though 3 psychiatrists and a psychologist testified that she was suffering from postpartum psychosis. What I find interesting, though, is even though we've had these other cases and it's recognized that it's postpartum psychosis and that the mother had no idea really what she was doing, she was out of touch with reality. Some of them were believing that their child was the devil and they were getting rid of evil in this world. Others thought they were preventing from kidnapping. These wild stories have come out, and yet still, Lindsay Clancy is being treated like this has never happened before.
Yeah, there's certainly some kind of issue within our healthcare system, which you and I have experienced as nurses, as moms. There's some kind of issue with recognizing the reality of what's going on with people who have some kind of psychiatric issue. This is one of the most extreme psychiatric issues out there. So it pulls people in when it shows up in the media, and people have very strong opinions about it one way or another. But it's really hard when you feel like people are not understanding the depth to which this type of psychiatric illness, psychosis, affects people in a way that they cannot control. And that's what we've seen here with all of these women we've talked about tonight. It's something that we want to continue to bring some awareness of. So I'm so grateful that we were able to talk about it here on the podcast.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought of too that I found interesting and very sad is, like in Carol Coronado's case, she had a judge. She decided to go against having a jury, and I think that might have been a mistake. A male judge who clearly has never experienced any postpartum depression.
Right.
And when you have the husbands coming forward, now these are their children who they've lost.
Right.
When the husbands are coming forward and saying it wasn't her fault,
Right.
she didn't know what she was doing,
Yeah.
how can they charge them, or how can they be found guilty of murder when their
Right.
own husbands are coming forward and saying this isn't her fault? She was so sick.
Right. And everyone in their community is coming forward and saying, like, she was a great mom. I left my kids with her. I would have trusted her with the things that are most precious to me. Yeah, I've heard that in a lot of these cases as well. It's very difficult for me to understand, but I would love to hear from people who maybe think differently. So if we do have listeners who think very differently about this type of situation, please feel free to leave your comments below. I like to hear from people who have different opinions about the topics that we cover here. But it's been very difficult for me to really understand how anyone can hold this type of person accountable for something they did that clearly has completely destroyed everything they loved in the world, really.
Right. And they're going to live with the consequences for the rest of their life, whether they're in prison or not. Like I said, there is no punishment that can be worse than what they've already gotten from their acts.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So for me, like, Lauren, I'm just so grateful that you had me on the podcast once again to talk about this subject, because as you know, like, I have this background in psychiatric nursing, and it is something that I have been quite aware of since the Andrea Yates case, and that I want to come out and speak about and just, ensure that I am doing my best to inform and educate people on any platform that I have, in order to, make it clear that this is something that does happen to women after they give birth. And there are severe consequences that can come from not getting the treatment that they so desperately need.
Right. I think the big message of tonight's podcast is, if you know somebody who's recently given birth, don't assume that she's got it all under control. Be there
Right.
for her. Bring her a wonderful meal. Offer to come in and take care of the baby so she can take a nap. She needs to sleep. More than anything, she needs rest. Help her.
Right.
Don't ask her, just do it.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
I'll put in some important phone numbers in the description box for people who might need them. And I'll put in some more information about potential causes for psychosis.
Yeah. And I think you and I have talked about, maybe in the future we'll do, or you will do some podcasts where we can give out different kinds of tips and advice. And this is one of those things that we could be addressing on future podcasts as well, like different things that you can do for a mother after she gives birth, like how to be there for someone that you love. We could do some
Yeah, you know what might be really fun? It would be like what would be the best meal to take to a new mom?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
recipes, even something as specific as a recipe might be really cool, because I think bone broth
Yes.
is right up there.
Right. Agreed. And I think sometimes, for me, I like to have an outline of what I should be doing. When I was meeting with my doctor earlier today, I asked for an outline. What exactly do I need to do next? So that would be great. In the future, hopefully we'll do some more podcasts giving out advice and really spreading the word about what we can do to help each other as a community of mothers on the Mothership Explores.
Thank you so much, Katie, for being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge. I think it's really important to bring this to the public's attention as much as we can on my itty bitty channel. Whatever we can do to help bring awareness, to help prevent this from happening again, to help moms who are suffering in the postpartum period. Of course, I want to do it.
See you next time.
I've never spoken to Ms. Coronado personally, so it's very difficult for me to give you an accurate description, but from what I've read about her, in her employment records, her records in the Army, the military, seems nice. I mean, she seemed like a nice lady. I don't know that I can tell you exactly how you get from being this nice lady to committing these types of heinous crimes.